Let's get to the power situation around Australia. You remember back in the 90s, we used to have some of the cheapest power in the world. It was our key competitive advantage. Our wages, of course, higher than our region, but our power prices, well, they were dirt cheap. That's why we were globally competitive in steel, fuel refining, cement making, aluminium smelting, manufacturing, the whole box and dice. But now we're not competitive. Over the last decade or so, wholesale prices on average have tripled on the East Coast. They have tripled. Here's the figures. 2012-13 financial year, the average wholesale power prices in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, including South Australia too, $32 per megawatt hour. Now fast forward to 2022-23, the financial year just gone. It's only 10 years. Well, the average wholesale power price, $128 per megawatt hour. That's a 300% increase over the exact period when the politicians began phasing out coal and replacing it with Chinese-made, weather-dependent solar panels and wind turbines. Joining me for some common sense here, the Australian's Environment Editor, Graham Lloyd. Graham, welcome as always. We saw that report out today, the data from AEMO. Sure, emissions are down, but we're paying through the nose. We've got, power prices up 31% over the last 3 months. As I say, I don't need to tell my viewers at home that. They know that. They're living with these power prices. How do you run a business with these sorts of increases? But we're told too, aren't we, that there's the so-called wind and solar glut. Well, if it's supposed to be cheap renewables, why doesn't it feel cheap?
Well, good evening, Peter. Yes, look, there's a lot in this latest AEMO report, which basically says that power prices went up by a third in the last quarter. But for a lot of that time, the wind and solar projects were actually paying to put electricity into the system. So what that tells you is that the prices that is paid for what's really holding it all together, that's basically gas and coal and fossil fuels, that has been made so uncompetitive and expensive that the entire system suffers as a result.
So what happens when they don't pay to put it into the system?
Well, this is the big question. When they are producing, they basically have to pay to get rid of it, and the argument that, well, you just build more and it all becomes cheaper, really has to be put to a test, because they're all going to be producing, you would imagine, at the same time. So really there's not much of a business case to deliver it when they can. And so you still need the rest of the system to hold it all together. And this is the equation that needs to be dealt with in terms of storage and spreading the time of use for this stuff around. But at the moment, we haven't got there, and that's why prices are continuing to rise.
We know that there's reports out today that say people can't pay their power bills. I think there's a report saying 1 in 10 are at default. We've got cancellations, we've got pensioners too scared, as I say, to turn the heater on. They're doing everything they can to avoid using power. It's simply not sustainable.
That's right. This is really a huge impost now on ordinary consumers. The government has made the point, look, they could be worse. We've been doing things and trying to make them cheaper, but the bottom line is they are much more expensive, and the figures that you reported earlier shows exactly how much they have risen over the past few years, and people now cannot afford it.
Yeah, but that's just such a lie from the government. I mean, it's like a doctor saying you've got cancer, but it could be worse, you could be dead. Well, you've still got to fight cancer. It's still not good news. Yes, they could be worse. Everything could be worse, but it's pretty bad if you're getting those bills and you can't pay for them. Talk to me about Rio Tinto. I saw that report today. Almost $1.5 billion wiped off the value of its alumina refineries in Australia. This is where we take the bauxite we mine up north and we put it through processing here in Australia. I've always argued the moment we lose that large-scale capacity to smelt aluminium, to make weapons-grade steel in this country, we're not just economically worse off, I think we're strategically worse off. What's the risk, Graham, that with the power prices we've got, that we're going to lose these sort of sovereign capabilities in Australia?
Well, this is the proof, isn't it, arising. There's always been this concern that if you follow the decarbonisation policies, the biggest impact is going to be on trade-exposed industries like aluminium. We're always told, look, the systems are designed to protect trade-exposed industries, but Rio has come out in the last day and said, in light of the strengthened safeguards mechanism, they've written the value of their aluminium business down to zero. To stay here, they need to find a reliable and cheap alternative source of power, and that is not immediately on the horizon. So they're saying they have every intention of making it work, but they're speaking with their red pen. And if you look what's happening elsewhere, China building power stations furiously, it is adding Australia's entire carbon dioxide emissions every 6 months. That's where these industries are going to go.
Yep, we'll go out the back door. We're back to the Stone Age, and we're less than 1.3% now of global emissions. That'll be cold comfort when we haven't got an economy. Graham Lloyd, thank you as always.